Architecture CodeX. If you want to see more, like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe.
If I were to ask you what cities were the most influential when it came to promoting cutting-edge architecture in the modern period, you might argue Chicago or New York or any of the three cities that housed the Bauhaus. But do you know about Columbus, Indiana? Fire Station Number 4 by Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown is just one of the many buildings in this city designed by the biggest named architects from around the country. This fire station, built in 1968, is perhaps symbolic of the entire city's effort to promote good architecture, architecture that envisioned a future of design that would improve people's lives. In 1954, the CEO of Cummins Corporation, J. Irwin Miller, a lay Christian leader and civil rights activist, decided that to promote good architecture, he would pay for the commissions of the architects for significant community buildings. This permitted the city to hire world-renowned architects, assuming that price had always been the barrier. Miller's own house, designed by Eero Saarinen in 1957, displays modernism at its best, with clean lines, elemental geometries, and smooth surfaces. There are a lot of great buildings in Columbus, Indiana. In general, I would say those were the ones designed by architects with enough self-confidence that they simply met the program, served the function, and built well. Others tried to build to create their place in history, and I don't think they were successful. The First Baptist Church by Harry Weese gets an A+. The two Christian churches done by father and son Saarinens also get an A+, and are among the public buildings that exude excellence, pleasing to the eye, and they serve their purpose well. I even liked the Southside Elementary School by Elliot Noyes, which I give an A.
But I like brutalism.
In addition to its brutalist exterior, the interior had a finished monumentality that I found lacking in a lot of other Columbus buildings. Admittedly, I did not speak to any student who went there, so if you did and you have your own opinion, please feel free to express that in the comments below. In fact, any native of Columbus, Indiana, I'd be interested in hearing what you think about all that architecture in your city. On my visit in the 1980s, there were some buildings that were not quite as successful. I think in general they seemed to be incomplete, as if the idea looked great on paper, but somehow when it was built, something drastic was missing. Note that while the Cummins Foundation paid extra for the famous architects, they did not increase the normal budget for the buildings. Some of these famous architects then were constrained by ordinary budgets, and their difficulty working in the real world was exposed. But I also think that some of the schools we saw were experimenting with pedagogy, their teaching method, and it was hard to discern from the teachers with whom we spoke in these buildings if, for example, the open classroom led to the design, or if the design led to the open classroom. I also wonder if the overall idea behind the program is flawed. Are all famous architects really better architects? Or is it just that the expert must be 50 miles away? Is there not a local architect who is also creative and skilled, and who perhaps better understands the town and the people, and could have done a better job with some of the buildings that were designed? Back to the building. Fire Station Number 4 is a simple and small building. The building is a basic two-tone brick box with a few distinguishing elements. Windows and doors do not necessarily line up with the lines of the building form or each other, as modernists or even traditionalists might do. Instead, windows cross the brick color boundary, and the main void of the garage doors to the apparatus bay,
Front and back, are not parallel.
Venturi and Scott Brown are playfully working in a postmodern fashion with basic materials to create interest through asymmetry and imbalance. They are not, however, employing historic references, as they have done in much of their other work. The most notable feature, the hose tower, becomes a steeple of sorts, announcing the building with a wry reference to the function. Hose lines were drained by hanging them in a pit. There are other methods used today, but Venturi Scott Brown elevated the pit into an architectural feature and then put it over the main entrance. The main entrance has no exterior canopy, so the architects are almost daring the occupants to get in and out of the building without being dripped upon. The architectural statement is strong, but the practicality is inconvenient to the people who inhabit the building. Are we building to make architectural statements, to find our place in history, or are we building for people? This was best summed up by one of the firefighters who was giving a tour of the fire station and summed up his complaints to those students who were visiting by saying, "Look, I like architecture too, but there are limits." And yes, there are limits. But I recognize that sometimes the communication process during design and construction is not what it should be. Often the architect is distanced from the users of the building because management thinks they know better. And when I do try and get access to the users of the building, I do have to be cautious because sometimes their view of what is going on is so narrow that it may exclude some of the other important design features. It is very likely that Venturi Scott Brown had some specific design parameters and they met all those parameters, but those parameters may not have come from the occupants of the building, nor were they communicated to the people in the building. So some 10 years later, it is very easy for users of the building or even the maintenance people not to understand what was supposed to be going on. And at that point, it's just easier to blame the architect. And yet, the disconnect of design from a function that served the people at Fire Station Number 4 may be emblematic for the entire city of Columbus, Indiana. The architecture did not make the city immune from economic downturns, substance abuse, or other social disorders. There is only so much a building can do. In the end, it is the people, their hopes and beliefs, their faith, their shared values, their personal virtues, and their determination that build communities. The buildings are simply one tool to that end. This theme is explored, albeit very slowly, in the movie Columbus. But you get the sense that the population was experimented upon, with occasionally little regard for the impact the architecture would have on people. While it started with the most noble of intentions, it seems to have been like some sort of architectural Tuskegee experiment, with the people paying the price for the elite's curiosity. But don't rely on me. Go to Columbus, Indiana yourself. The town is very accommodating when it comes to giving out maps, information, and guided tours, and you can make your own judgments. I should probably return to Columbus, Indiana to see for myself what has been built since, and if the lessons from the mid-century have been learned, that architecture at its core is essentially a service, and that we aren't designing for our egos, but for other people. In all my practice, I have never forgotten that caveat from that firefighter, whose quote ranks up there with messages from Vitruvius and Mies van der Rohe. I like architecture too, but there are limits. I am Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture CodeX.